You almost handed over your health the same way I nearly handed over mine, and it started with something as small as a snack. That plastic-wrapped thing you reach for at 3 in the afternoon is quietly doing to you what it did to me. Here is the claim I need you to sit with. The snacks your mother made in the 1970s, from a few cheap things already in the kitchen, were keeping you healthier than anything you can buy today, and they were abandoned on purpose, not because they stopped working, because nobody could sell them back to you. Stay with me, because near the end I am going to give you the exact finding from a 1992 federal shift and a 2019 study out of the National Institutes of Health that finally explained why I was gaining weight while eating less. It is the fix that pulled me back from the edge, and it cost you almost nothing to try this weekend, right in the kitchen you already have. I remember the moment it hit me. I was standing in my kitchen in late autumn, the light going gray through the window over the sink, holding a snack bar I had eaten every single day for a year because the label said heart healthy. My doctor had just called with numbers I did not want to hear, and I stood there reading 29 ingredients I could not pronounce on something I had trusted, and I felt like a fool. Let me back up and tell you how I got there, because I think you are closer to that same phone call than you realize. For most of my life, I ate the way my mother taught me. She was born in 1934, raised in the tail end of the Depression, and she carried those habits straight into our 1970s kitchen without ever calling them anything special. To her, they were just Tuesday. A handful of raisins and peanuts, celery stalks she filled with peanut butter and lined with raisins, and we called them ants on a log, and I thought they were the finest thing in the world. Then somewhere in my 40s, life got busy and the store got convenient. I stopped making. I started buying. And for about 30 years I told myself the box on the shelf was basically the same thing my mother used to make, only faster. That was the lie that nearly cost me everything, and I did not even know I was telling it. So here is the first thing I had to unlearn, and I want you to feel how simple it is. My mother's number one snack was not fancy. It was popcorn. Popped in a heavy pot with a little oil, shaken over the flame until it roared. On Friday nights she would make popcorn balls, melting a little sugar and molasses and butter, pressing the hot corn into balls with buttered hands. That was our candy. And here is what I did not understand until my scare. Plain popcorn is one of the highest fiber whole grains you can eat, cup for cup. 3 cups of it, air-popped, is about 100 calories and gives you more fiber than a lot of the cereals sold as healthy. My mother did not know the science. She just knew it filled us up and cost almost nothing. A pound of popcorn kernels in 1972 cost pennies and made bowl after bowl after bowl. Now compare that to what I was buying. A bag of microwave popcorn dusted in artificial butter flavor, or worse, a bag of chips engineered so that I could not stop at one. And that is not an accident. That is the part that made me angry once I understood it, and I will get to who did it and why. But first let me stay in my mother's kitchen a little longer, because there were more of these snacks than I can count, and every one of them was quietly working in my favor. There was homemade granola, which barely existed in stores before the 1970s and then exploded, and my mother made hers on a sheet pan with oats and honey and a handful of sunflower seeds, toasted low and slow until the whole house smelled like warm caramel. There were deviled eggs on Sunday, protein you could hold in your hand. There was stuffed celery and cottage cheese with canned peaches and apple slices with a smear of peanut butter. There was homemade fruit leather, made by cooking down applesauce and spreading it thin on a tray to dry, which my grandmother learned from her mother, who learned it in an era when you dried fruit or you lost it. None of these came from a package. Every one of them was built from a handful of real things, and every one of them was slowly, deliberately pushed out of the American kitchen, and I lived through the whole thing without noticing it happen. Here is where I have to tell you who did it, because now we are past the part where I only blame myself. Around 1980 and into the 1980s, the American snack industry figured out something that changed your kitchen forever. They learned they could take the cheapest raw materials on earth, corn, refined oil, salt, and sugar, and engineer them into products designed around a single goal. Not nutrition, not keeping you full. The goal was to hit what food scientists later called the bliss point, the exact combination of salt, sugar, and fat that overrides the signal your body sends when it has had enough. My mother's popcorn told my stomach when to stop. The engineered snack was built so that signal never arrives. And they had a reason to bury the homemade version. You cannot patent a popcorn ball. You cannot put a trademark on ants on a log. There is no shareholder meeting excited about celery. The only snacks worth marketing were the ones you could not make yourself, the ones with a secret formula and a factory and a commercial during my favorite show. So those are the ones they showed me, over and over, for 30 years, until I forgot I had ever known how to make my own. Let me pull you forward again to that gray afternoon, because this is where the countdown really started for me. The doctor's office had called about my blood work. My blood sugar was creeping into a range that had a name I did not like. My weight was up, my cholesterol was up, and the cruel part, the part that made no sense to me, was that I had been eating less than I did at 40. Smaller portions, diet labels, heart-healthy stamps. I was doing everything the packages told me, and my body was going the wrong direction, and I could feel my independence starting to slip, because I have watched what happens to people my age when the sugar numbers go bad and never come back. That is the moment I want to save you from, because I had maybe a year, the doctor said, to turn it around before it became something I would manage with medication for the rest of my life. 1 year. A countdown I did not ask for. So I did something I had not done in decades. I called my aunt, my mother's younger sister, who was 83 at the time and sharper than me, and I asked her what we actually ate when we were kids, before the boxes took over. And what she told me over that phone call started pulling threads I could not stop pulling. She reminded me of no-bake cookies, the ones made on the stovetop with oats and cocoa and peanut butter, dropped onto wax paper to set. She reminded me of buttermilk, which my grandmother drank cold as a snack, a fermented food full of the kind of bacteria we now pay a fortune for in tiny yogurt cups. She reminded me of homemade Czech-style party mix, cereal and nuts and pretzels toasted in the oven with a little butter and seasoning, made in a giant batch that lasted a week, and she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "We were never hungry between meals, because the snacks had something in them. Fiber, protein, fat that came from a nut or an egg, not a fryer. They held you." And that word held stuck in me, because I realized the modern snacks did the opposite. They emptied me out. An hour after a bag of chips, I was hungrier than before I opened it. I was eating 3 times to feel what one of my mother's snacks used to do once. But knowing the old snacks were better was not enough. I needed to know why, with numbers, because I am the kind of person who does not change until I understand the mechanism. And that is when I found the study that changed my life. Before I give it to you, I have to tell you about the shift that made all of it possible, because there is a specific document and a specific year, and once you know it, you cannot unsee it. In 1992, the federal government released the original food guide pyramid, and at the very bottom, the foundation, the part they told every American to eat the most of, was 6 to 11 servings a day of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. Refined grains. The exact category the snack industry was best at turning into cheap, shelf-stable, engineered product. Fat was the enemy in that pyramid, so the peanut butter my mother spread on celery, the whole eggs, the nuts, the real butter on the popcorn, all of it got labeled dangerous. And the low-fat, high-carbohydrate snacks, loaded with sugar to make up for the flavor the fat used to carry, got a health halo they never earned. I followed that pyramid like scripture, and it walked me straight toward that phone call from my doctor. Now here is the study, and I want you to hold on to this one. In 2019, a researcher named Kevin Hall at the National Institutes of Health ran an experiment that should have been front-page news and barely made a ripple. He took a group of adults and had them live where every meal was provided. For 2 weeks, they ate ultra-processed food, the packaged, engineered kind. For 2 weeks, they ate unprocessed, whole food. Both diets were matched for calories, sugar, fat, and fiber on paper. The people were told to eat as much or as little as they wanted. On the ultra-processed diet, people ate about 500 calories a day more, without noticing, and they gained weight. On the whole food diet, eating the same available calories, they ate less and lost weight. Same numbers on the label. Completely different result in the body. It was the first tightly controlled study to prove that it is not just what is in the food, it is what has been done to it. The processing itself was making people overeat. And if you want to go even deeper into exactly this kind of rediscovery, I put together a book called Smart Starts that walks through the forgotten snack wisdom we have been talking about, along with the practical systems behind it. You can find it linked in the description below. It is the kind of resource that turns one good phone call with an aunt into a complete change in how you think about feeding yourself every single day. Now she had more to say, and what she told me next is the part that finally gave me the word I had been missing. I read that and I sat back in my chair, because that was me. That was the last 30 years of my life explained in one experiment. My mother's snacks were not magic. They were simply unprocessed, and my body knew what to do with them. The engineered snacks had been quietly overriding my off switch, 500 calories a day at a time, and the pyramid had told me they were the responsible choice. So I started making, and I want to walk you through exactly what I did, because this is the part you can copy this week. The first thing I brought back was the popcorn, because it was the easiest and the cheapest. A quarter cup of kernels, a spoon of oil, a heavy pot with a lid, 2 minutes over medium heat, shaking, and I had a giant bowl for less than a dime. I salted it lightly and some nights tossed it with a little grated Parmesan and black pepper. That one swap replaced every chip and cracker in my house, and within 2 weeks I noticed I was not raiding the kitchen at 9 at night anymore, because the fiber actually held me, just like my aunt said. The second thing was ants on a log and its cousins, celery, carrot sticks, apple slices, all with real peanut butter, the kind with just peanuts and salt. Protein and fat and fiber, the exact combination the pyramid had told me to fear, and the exact combination that turns a snack from a trap into a meal that ends. The third thing was a batch of homemade party mix on Sunday, whole grain cereal, a handful of nuts, some pretzels, tossed with melted butter, a little Worcestershire, garlic powder, and baked low for an hour. It made enough to last the week, It cost a fraction of a single bag of chips, and I controlled every gram of salt. Now, right here I need to stop and talk to one person in particular, because I know you are out there. Maybe you are watching this on a fixed income. Maybe it is just you in the house now, and cooking for one feels like more trouble than it is worth, and you are thinking all of this sounds nice for people with money for nuts and fancy peanut butter and time to stand over a stove. I put this next part in the video specifically for you, because the truth is the exact opposite of what you are afraid of, and I do not want you to click away believing the lie that eating well is a rich person's game. The single cheapest snack in this entire video is the one my grandmother leaned on hardest during the Depression, and it costs almost nothing. Popcorn. A 1-pound bag of plain kernels can be bought for $1 or $2, and it will make more snacks than a whole shelf of chips. Easily 30 or 40 big bowls out of one bag. You do not need a machine. You need a pot with a lid and a stove. That is it. My grandmother made it in a cast iron pot on a wood stove. If she could do it in 1935 with nothing, you can do it tonight. And here is the second no-cost move, the one that changes everything for a person living alone. You do not have to make a fresh snack every single time. My aunt taught me to cook once and eat all week, the way they had to before refrigeration was reliable. Boil a half-dozen eggs on Sunday, and they are your grab-and-go protein for days. Sitting in the refrigerator, cheaper per gram of protein than almost anything in the store. Make 1 tray of oat and cocoa no-bake cookies, and they last. Toast 1 big batch of party mix. The Depression-era kitchen was built entirely around the person with little money and little waste, which is exactly the person the modern snack aisle preys on hardest, because convenience is what they charge you the most for. One more thing for you, and it costs nothing but a jar. If you have a little milk about to turn, you do not have to throw it out. My grandmother let milk clabber and drank it, and buttermilk was a snack, a source of the same beneficial bacteria that companies now sell back to you in tiny plastic cups for $4. I am not telling you to gamble with spoiled milk. I am telling you that a carton of real cultured buttermilk from the store is one of the cheapest fermented foods on the shelf, and a small glass of it cold was a snack in my family for 100 years. Nothing about being careful with money should keep you from any of this. Being careful with money is exactly why these snacks existed in the first place. Now let me pull the countdown tight again, because I do not want you to forget what is at stake. I had 1 year, the doctor said, and 3 months in I went back for new blood work, and I was terrified, because I had changed almost nothing except my snacks. I had not started running marathons. I was not eating like a monk. I had simply swapped the engineered stuff for the things my mother used to make, the popcorn, the eggs, the celery and peanut butter, the party mix, the fruit slices. That was it. And when the numbers came back, my blood sugar had dropped back down out of the danger zone. My weight was down 11 pounds. My doctor asked me what medication I had started, and I told him none. I told him I started eating like it was 1974 again. He got quiet, and then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Whatever you are doing, do not stop." So now let me hand you the finale, the single most surprising thing I found in all of this, the one that ties every thread together, because it is not really about any one snack. It is about a rule. When I went digging into how my mother and grandmother actually decided what to feed us, I expected to find recipes. Instead, I found a principle, one that runs straight through the old homemaking manuals and the Depression-era thrift guides and the extension pamphlets that university farm programs mailed out to households in the 1930s and 40s. The principle was this: A snack should be made of things you could point to and name: an egg, a nut, a grain, a vegetable, a piece of fruit. If a child could not name every part of it, it was not food, it was a treat, and treats were rare. And here is the part that stunned me. That old plain rule is almost word for word what modern researchers now use to define ultra-processed food. The scientists behind that 2019 study use a classification system developed by a Brazilian research team led by a scientist named Carlos Monteiro that sorts food by exactly this question: not how many calories, not how much fat, but how far it has been pushed from the thing it started as, and whether it contains ingredients you would never find in a home kitchen. Emulsifiers, isolates, flavorings with code names. The most advanced nutrition science of our lifetime circled all the way back around and landed on my grandmother's rule. Could you name every part of it? That is the fix. That is the whole thing. You do not need to memorize the 25 snacks I have been describing. You need one question, the one my family used without ever writing it down. Before you eat it, can you name what it is made of? If yes, your body knows what to do with it, the way it has for 10,000 years. If no, it was probably built in a lab to get past the very off switch that would otherwise protect you. The knowledge was never lost by accident. It was simply not profitable to keep repeating, so it stopped being repeated, and one generation, my mother's generation, was the last to carry it without thinking. It nearly died in the gap between her kitchen and mine. It pulled me back from a diagnosis I thought was coming for me no matter what. And now you have it, sitting in your hands, before you ever get the phone call I got on that gray afternoon. Let me leave you with the feeling I walked away with, because the information is only half of it. The thing that saved me was not a superfood or a supplement or some expensive new plan. It was the plain, stubborn, penny-pinching wisdom of two women who fed a family through hard times with a pot of popcorn and a stalk of celery, and who never once imagined that anyone would try to sell it back to their grandson at a markup. You are not behind for not knowing this. You were kept from it. And the moment you make one bowl of stovetop popcorn or fill one stalk of celery, you take it back. You strike me as the kind of person who already suspected something was off, who looked at those long ingredient lists and felt in your gut that food did not used to be this complicated, and who refuses to be caught off guard by a system that profits when you stay dependent on it. That instinct was right the whole time. So tell me one thing down in the comments, because I read them and I want to know. Which snack from your own childhood did I bring back for you just now? Was it the popcorn balls, the ants on a log, the no-bake cookies, or something your mother made that I did not even mention? Name it and tell me who used to make it for you. Put it in the comments right now, because someone else scrolling by is going to see it and remember their own kitchen, and that is how we keep this from disappearing for good. And if you want to stand with people who are quietly digging all of this back up, the methods and the recipes and the small forgotten skills that used to keep folks healthy and independent and free of the monthly bill, subscribe and stay with us, because that is exactly what we do here. Next time I am going to show you the 3 things my grandmother kept in her pantry that meant she never once paid for a store-bought remedy when a cold came through the house, and one of them is probably sitting in your cabinet right now doing nothing. Do not miss it. Make the popcorn tonight, and I will see you in the next one. This video barely scratched the surface. Inside the Wise Living Circle, I show you every snack, step by step, in your own kitchen. And if you get stuck, you can ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Never a machine. You won't be doing this alone. Wise living folks like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. And you can cancel any time. No risk at all.